Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Box Office Talk. This is the show where I break down what happened at the box office, see if my predictions for the top 5 are correct, then make predictions for next week's top 5. So let's get right on into it. Last week, I predicted the number 1 would be Charlie's Angels, number 2 would be Ford versus Ferrari, number 3 would be The Good Liar, number 4 would be Midway, and number 5 would be Dr. Sleep. And very similar to last weekend, I got 0 out of 5 of my predictions right. Not 1, not 2, just flat old 0. I was at least hoping that even though it was another crowded weekend, maybe I would get at least number 1 right. I was very wrong because what I predicted for number 2 was number 1. That would be Ford versus Ferrari, actually doing better than some people anticipated, making $31 million on its opening weekend, and worldwide it is already sitting at $52 million. Now the budget is $97.6 million according to Wikipedia, so it has a ways to go to double that and even cross over it in this case too, but this is actually a pretty good start for it nonetheless. I think the fact that it was able to do better than expected, and I think because this is probably going to be an Oscar hopeful, I think they're going to have a pretty good chance of doubling that budget and being a success. Domestically, it is the third highest opening for James Mangold right after his 2 Wolverine films, so this is actually a pretty good achievement that, aside from his comic book movies, this is his highest opening weekend, so that's pretty good for him to say the least. Once again, it still has a ways to go until it becomes like actually profitable once it doubles its budget, but I think it'll have a pretty bright future. At least I hope so, because the movie was very good, and I hear it's resonating well with audiences as well, because it has like an A+ or an A on Cinema Score, which is fantastic. Number 2, we have Midway, still clinging on there, making $8.7 million, adding to a domestic total of $35 million. Worldwide, it is at $64 million, according to Wikipedia, so they're inching closer to their initial production budget of $100 million, but they still need to double that to be considered a success. I don't think they're going to get to that point at all, even with worldwide territories. I think it's just going to stop at some point. Now, compared to Roland Emmerich's other films, it has already outgrossed Stonewall and Anonymous, both domestically and worldwide. On the domestic chart, though, it has $1 million away from outgrossing this movie called Universal Soldier that he did. I think that was his first movie. And then worldwide, it has $132 million more to go to outgross Stargate as far as those charts go. So domestically, it's inching up just a little bit, but worldwide, it's looking like this is going to be one of his lower grossing ones, aside from the 2 that I mentioned earlier. So, I mean, hey, it's doing better than I expected, but it's still not doing all that good. But hey, at least it managed to beat out Charlie's Angels, which got in at number 3 somehow. I thought for sure this would get number 1 because it was an action movie. It was based off a previous property, but apparently not too many people were interested at this time around. It made $8.6 million, and worldwide, it only has a total of $27 million. Not only is this really bad because the budget is between like $48 million and $55, so we're just going to estimate like a straight down 50 for right now, but this is also a lower opening weekend than the first 2 Charlie's Angels movies from 2000, that movie opening with $40 million, and then the 2003 movie Full Throttle, which opened with $37 million. The fact that it went from $40 million, $37, and then multiple years later we got an $8 million opening, that is not very good in the slightest. I know Elizabeth Banks recently released a statement saying like if this movie flops, it's just a further proof that men don't support women action movies, and I think that's a very, not only do I think that's a really unreasoned argument, but I think that it will only continue to hurt her kind of profits here. Already, it isn't doing that well, but now that she has said this, and as soon as it starts to spread more, it definitely won't help you out later. So kind of a big bummer if you were a fan of this movie. I heard mixed reception about it, so maybe that's what drove people away, or maybe it was because people aren't interested in Charlie's Angels, or maybe it was because they saw the trailers and thought it didn't look good like I did. I'm going to try to see this movie at some point for the channel, but I mean, I'm not surprised that it's not doing as well as it could have, but the fact that it opened this low was very surprising to me. Number 4, we have Playing with Fire, making $8.5 million, adding to a domestic total of $25 million. Worldwide, it is only at $30 million, so it's nowhere near doubling its $29.9 million budget right now, but at least it made 0.1 over that initial production budget, so good for Andy Fickman, the director. As far as his previous films, it still needs to outgross She's the Man, which is currently his lower grossing one. It's $8 million away domestically from outgrossing it, and then worldwide, it's $28 million away from outgrossing it. So maybe domestically, I think for sure domestically, but worldwide it's a little bit up in the air because I'm not sure how much of an audience this movie has worldwide. So domestically, I think it will be able to become his only second overall grossing film, but worldwide, I think this might be his lowest grossing one. Number 5, we have Last Christmas, making $6.7 million, adding to a domestic total of $22 million. Worldwide, it is only sitting at $35 million. So they were able to get past its initial production budget of $30 million, good for them, but they still need to double that, and I'm not sure if it's going to get there there, at least for Paul Feig's filmography. It did pass Unaccompanied Minors by $6 million domestically, and worldwide it passed it by $14 million, so that's pretty good. It's at least more of a grosser than his first two movies, which didn't do that well altogether. But as far as A Simple Favor, which was his last film and was his previous lowest grossing one, it needs $31 million domestically to outgross it, and worldwide $62 million. So I don't think it's going to outgross A Simple Favor whatsoever at this point. Maybe around Christmas time this movie might get a revitalization, maybe, but I really don't see that happening. Number 6, we have Dr. Sleep making $6.1 million, adding to a domestic total of $25 million. So it's $19 million away from outgrossing The Shining, and as far as Mike Flanagan's filmography, it's $2 million away from outgrossing Oculus, so that's pretty good for them. Worldwide, it is sitting at $53 million, which is already outgrossing The Shining by $9 million, so good for them, but it just passed Mike Flanagan's film Oculus by $9 million, and it needs $28 million more to outgross Ouija Origin of Evil. Whether I think that'll happen or not is completely up in the air, since it's dipping down a lot. Last weekend it was at number 2, and now it's at number 6. Not really a good sign as far as staying power, but hey, I'm glad that this movie is making some money, because the budget is $50 million, and the fact that they're only at $53 million worldwide is very upsetting to me. Number 7, we have The Good Liar, which I thought would do a little bit better, but I guess not, making $5.65 million, adding to a worldwide total of $9 million altogether. Now, the budget is only $10 million, so maybe the combined domestic and worldwide total, because this movie is more catered to like the UK audience. You have a lot of UK stars, and I think it takes place in the UK too, so I think it'll do better worldwide there, but right now domestically it's not doing all that good. But since the budget is relatively low, they have a better chance of doubling that budget to begin with, so that's pretty good for them. The director, Bill Condon, it's not one of his lowest openings, but it's definitely not one of his bigger ones. Like, once you see how big some of his movies have opened, you kind of look at this and think, well, at least it's not his lowest opening weekend, but goddamn, you know? Then number 8, we have Joker making $5.63 million, so maybe this and Good Liar could switch up at some point. That adds to a domestic total of $322 million. Worldwide, it is sitting at $1.016 billion, and is the first R-rated film to reach $1 billion. That's amazing for this film. Obviously, it just hit a really landmark achievement, which is great. And also worldwide, it just outgrossed The Dark Knight's $1.001 billion. So it has joined the DC billion dollar club. It's $68 million away from outgrossing The Dark Knight Rises and $130 million away from outgrossing Aquaman. I don't think it's going to do it at this point, but I'm glad that it was able to at least enter the top 4 for the DC billion dollar club for them. Number 9, we have Maleficent, Mistress of Evil, making $5.2 million, adding to a domestic total of $106 million. Worldwide, it is sitting at $458 million. So unfortunately, it wasn't able to hit $500 million before it left the top 10, but it still was able to at least double their budget of $185 million, even if it wasn't as big a smash as that first Maleficent movie. At least they aren't going out completely terribly, but it's still not all that good. Whatever, we're probably not going to see this next weekend. And finally, closing out the video, number 10, we have Harriet making $4 million, adding to a domestic total of $31 million. It's $3 million away from doubling its $17 million budget, so maybe it can do that once it leaves the top 10. But as far as Cynthia Erivo's career, as I mentioned kind of last week, worldwide it just passed Bad Times at the El Royale by $2 million, so that is very good for this film. Now it's time for the fun part, the predictions for next week's top 5. Number 1, I'm going with Frozen 2. Number 2, Ford versus Ferrari. Number 3, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. Number 4, 21 Bridges, and number 5, Midway. But what are your predictions for next week's top 5? Leave them in the comments below, and as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.